Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Our next guest is a legend. He's somebody I love. I began speaking to him in around about 2008 when I was doing radio in Spain. He is as well briefed a commentator and a journalist as anybody I've ever interviewed before. He publishes the brilliant Trends Journal. It's quarterly. Check out trendsresearch.com. He's been predicting trends that have been uncannily accurate for a long time now, more years maybe than he can care to remember. I recommend you subscribe to it. It's brilliant, it's vital reading, and he is vital listening. Let's welcome back to the programme our old pal, Gerald Celente. Gerald, welcome back. Always a pleasure. How are you?
Great being on with you, Richie. Thanks for having me back.
Well, there's so much we could talk about in the 30 minutes or 35 minutes we have, and I don't want to waste too much time. I don't want to say anything. My listeners want to hear you. What do you make of these Panama Papers that tell us that the rich and famous have been burying money using dodgy law firms to keep themselves from paying taxes, while most of us are on the hamster wheel, barely making it from month to month? Our listeners are probably saying, well, we knew these guys were doing this anyway. Is this a real story, or is it a smokescreen to hide something else? You've definitely got the answer, my friend. What do you think?
It's a little bit of both. And when you think about the Panama Papers and you read quotes, for example, coming out from The Guardian over there, and they say that they're reassuring the big cats that, quote, much of the leaked material will remain private. Isn't that something?
It's amazing.
Yeah, in a free society. In other words, we're going to protect who we want, and we're going to go after who we want. And then when you see who's behind this, like people like George Soros, and go back to when the Panama Papers were first released, who did the Western press go after? Putin. That was the first shot they took. Putin had nothing to do with this, but people that know Putin and that are associated with Putin are washing their dough. So all it is, as we see it, go back a year ago when Russia threw out people like Soros's group and other, quote, NGOs, non-governmental organizations that are very famous for infiltrating sovereign nations and starting problems, as they did in Ukraine. So this might be payback for Putin from Soros. Also, look at how few Americans are listed here. And the jive that you're hearing out of the States is that, well, the Americans don't have to go to, do a dirty deal in Panama. They could just go to Delaware, the loophole.
Yeah.
And, of course, Delaware, by the way, Delaware was run by Joe Biden, the vice president, who played senator there, for decades. And so it's just one criminal operation after another. And as you mentioned, why should people be surprised? All it is the rich people are doing what the corporations do, setting up offshore phony tax havens. And so they're doing the same thing as the Googles, the Microsofts, the Starbucks. And so all they are, this is a lot of hype. Is it going to hurt some people? Yes, it is. Look who they took down. Whoa, wow. The guy that the prime minister of Iceland. Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Couple of this tiny little country, while the big cats get a free ride.
I have a question for you about the Prime Minister of Iceland, Mr. Gunnlaugsson. A terrific reporter called Gerald Mon. Now, I know you've got some Irish in you, Mr. Celente. Gerald is an Irish boy. He's a very good journalist, can often be heard on RT and sometimes on Press TV. And he said that one of the reasons why the Icelandic president was targeted is because of some of the things he's taken a historical stance against Zionism and against the crimes of Israel. Now, to be fair to Gerald in his article, he was just asking the question. He wasn't making any statements that he couldn't back up. But again, enemies of Zionism, whether it be Putin's, cleansing Palmyra of ISIS, whether it be the Icelandic Prime Minister backing the boycott movement. We've had loads of tweets, by the way, since you came on. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. I'm also going to tweet out where you can find Gerald on Twitter. Follow his tweets, they're brilliant. Ingenious on Twitter says, this is for you, Gerald. No Queen of England, no Rothschilds, no Rockefellers, no Clintons, no Netanyahu. Only enemies of the cabal are mentioned in the Panama Papers, which is just what you said anyway.
Yes. So again, and look who's behind it. Look at the reach that this guy Soros has. It's not only with this group that he's funding, but also look what's going on here in the States. The dough that he's put behind the Clinton campaign and others. So, in the States, everyone points to the Koch brothers who support, another wing of politicians. But nobody ever points the finger at the liberal end. And they're not really liberal. They just use that word, and it's become bastardized. They're warmongers and also destroy the economy by giving everything to the too big to fail and the richest to the richer. So anyway, when you look at who's behind this, I'm suspect.
It's 16 minutes past the hour. The terrific Gerald Celente is on the line to us from New York City. I want you to go to trendsresearch.com. That's trendsresearch.com. We've just been talking about the Panama Papers and the way the media went after Putin, the Icelandic president, whom they didn't go after. Is it a smoke screen? Is it a smoke screen? A screen even, Gerald? Because you look at what's happening in Yemen. Our governments, the British and the American government, are absolutely complicit. They are an accessory after the fact that thousands of Yemeni civilians have been blown to pieces by this lunatic Saudi Arabian regime. We give them the weapons to do it with. Not only that, but we send them officers of our military to oversee it in their control rooms. A lot of human rights groups even getting a bit antsy about that, asking questions about that. We also have the inescapable, no matter how much the US media don't want to talk about it, the Russians have pretty much, along with the Syrian government, driven ISIS pretty much out of Syria, or nearly have done anyway. And then this kind of story comes along about all this tax avoidance and tax evasion. Is what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Yemen, has that got anything to do with this, do you think?
I don't think so, because most Americans have no clue what's going on
they don't care
in any of those places, particularly Yemen. And the murderous role that America's playing in that is not really talked about. And I say that because the United States is supplying the Saudis with the weaponry to destroy the Yemenis, the poorest nation in the Middle East, and also providing reconnaissance and refueling, intelligence, and the armaments. So, to us, that this isn't that. We don't see that. Again, as we see it, what it is, it's building up more anti-Russian sentiments as the United States and NATO are now planning to re-enter into the Libyan war, a place that they destroyed. And we believe that you're seeing now a re-escalation of the Syrian conflict that the United States and its allied partners in the Arab League and NATO have initiated. And I'm not making that up. You could hear Hillary Clinton, Assad has to go. You could hear that Peace Prize winner Obama, Assad has to go. So we think it's going to be a ratcheting up. And also, you mentioned what's going on with Israel and how, maybe because these people, nobody was connected on that end, the Rothschilds and others. Look what's going on in Israel as they continue to destroy Palestinian homes and take more land. It's not making the media at all. I'm mentioning that because it's ready to explode. When people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it. And then you look at the explosion from the refugee crisis. Again, no one talks about who caused it. Who caused it was America bombing Iraq and its NATO allies into oblivion, killing well over 1 million people there and in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Libya, now in Yemen. So the migrant refugee crisis is going to escalate. There's no way of doing anything to stop it other than, now, I may have the FBI, the CIA, and every other agency, Homeland Security, crashing through my doors at any second, so I'll say this before I get off the air. No one talks about peace.
No,
peace is a dirty word. That's the only thing that's going to stop this madness and regenerate economies. But you're not allowed to talk about it. We held Occupy Peace here, Richie, as you know, last September. We had Ralph Nader, Cindy Sheehan, Dr. Robert Thurman, Uma Thurman's father, Buddhist, Gary Null from New York City. We closed down the streets here in Colonial Kingston. I know billionaires and I know multimillionaires. They gave us not 1 cent when I asked them to help us support Occupy Peace. We paid for it out of the Trends Research Institute. We got some, support from people, but, very minimal. And it cost us well over 6 figures. Peace is off the agenda. So when we talk about these conspiracy theories, I want to read to you the hatred that America has been building against Russia so that you can keep building the military-industrial complex, spreading the neocon message, and moving further and further away from the agreement that was made between Reagan and Bush and Gorbachev not to expand NATO beyond where it was when Russia gave, or the Soviet Union gave back Eastern Germany, East Germany back to Germany. The deal was, okay, it's over, no more expansion. But they've been expanding, and the way they do it is by building hatred. So what happened with this Panama Papers is another level of anti-Russian, let's hate Putin propaganda went out. I'm going to read this from the spring 2014 Trends Journal. Leading up to the Sochi Olympics, media and government officials warned of looming terror attacks, hotels in disrepair, filth, yellow drinking water, and homophobes everywhere. The propaganda campaign primed Americans to view Russians unfavorably. The fear campaign worked. Just days before the opening ceremony, a February 5th CNN poll showed that 57% of Americans believed terror would strike during the Sochi Games. And we go on. So that's what we're looking at. A propaganda campaign that has been so far a resounding success.
It's been a huge success. We've seen it here as well in our own media. I laughed, knowing you were coming on this evening, I was laughing the other day when the Panama leaks were being reported on British television. You know the way the media works. You've worked in the media all your life. Within 25 minutes of it coming out, the 24-hour news channels had their special 5-minute features recorded, their inserts. And they started with this sort of stuff, Gerald. And I was thinking of you, because you've written about this for so long. They started with, heavy music, dramatic music, dun, dun, and then, what are tax havens? This is the voiceover, of course. Next thing is, imagine you're a Russian oligarch, right? I'm thinking of you, and I'm thinking, if Celente was listening to this, he'd be saying, imagine you're the British Prime Minister whose father was burying money for 30 years while he went to the richest schools in England. And it's just sickening. Are the media becoming, now you will say they always have been, but even more of a clear and present danger to our health, our well-being, and our security? How serious has it become, the media's relationship with the cabal, with the lunatics behind this paradigm?
Just look at the presidential reality show being played in the United States.
Which we were coming to, of course. Go ahead.
Who's it run by? Fox, CBS, ABC, and CNN. Private corporations host the debates. Democracy has been stolen from the people. Private corporations, and you mentioned the dramatic, build-up to the announcement, of the Panama Papers, and how they pin it on Putin. You listen to the build-up of the presidential reality show, and you have little guys like Anderson Cooper or the others over there, and I'm not making this up. And as the debates are ready to begin, they're taking a commercial break. He said, "And we'll be back shortly for the main event."
The main event.
The main event. A main event. Let's beat the clock. It's a game show. You have 90 seconds to answer the question, and if they mention your name, a 60-second rebuttal. This is not a debate. And they're getting $250,000 US for a 30-second commercial. The merger of state and corporate powers is called fascism. So when you're talking about the media, there is none. It's a corporate-run enterprise in bed with the government. Because when you look at the people in the media and look at their connections in and out of government, the lines are clearly there. So whether it's this, who's married to Greenspan, one after another. You had that guy who was Obama's press secretary, Carney. Carney, as you well know, is a slang for a carnival man.
Yeah, Art Carney, yeah.
Yeah, so that carnival man, he was a front. He used to work for Time magazine. And you could go up and down the list inside out. So there is no media. It's just the propaganda arm of the fascist governments that are destroying the world in front of our eyes. Oh, 1 million dead in Iraq isn't enough? Let's go for 3 million like they did in Vietnam. I say another 1 million or so in Afghanistan. Let's let that blood really run. There's no media. Look at all of the crap that they're pumping out of Europe with the refugee crisis. How about putting the finger on Murderer Cameron for destroying Libya? Or that Sarkozy and now that little guy with a pair of cojones the size of mothballs, Hollande, what he's done to Mali, what they're doing into Syria, and now they're going back into Libya. How about all of those murdering people that destroy these countries, and now they're crying like little boys and girls, oh, we have to deal with the refugee crisis, the crisis that you sick people created. But nobody wants to call a Merkel or a Cameron or a Hollande or a Rajoy, any of them by their true names, or an Obama. Psychopaths.
Lunatics. David Icke has been writing for years on many of the subjects you've been writing and talking about. One of the things, and I do want to come to Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in a second, because we've only got you for about another 10 minutes. Thanks for staying with us, by the way. If you're just tuning in, folks, an old friend of mine, it's an honour to have him on the programme, Gerald Celente from the Trends Journal. I can't recommend that highly enough. Go to trendsresearch.com. I've also tweeted out where you can find Gerald on Twitter. Many of you are following him on Twitter anyway, it must be said. David believes that they always knew the consequences of the actions in the Middle East. They always knew it was an intended consequence to drive the migration into Europe, because ultimately it becomes easier to dissolve any real opposition to what it is that they're bringing about, Gerald, this centralisation of power, which we've spoken about so many times before. It's, for some of them. Now, many of these leaders, of course, these state leaders, might be very dumb, as you've said to me before, and they are, and might not know that. But that's exactly what's intended to happen, David believes. I have sympathy with it, not because he's my friend and I kiss his arse, I don't do that at all, but I have sympathy with that. And that kind of neatly brings us around to, to the puppet show that is the US presidential election. You, by the way, caused me to laugh harder than anybody ever in my radio career ever, to the point some years ago, you probably will remember, maybe you won't, when I basically had to nearly give up. The first time I ever heard you use the term Hillary Clinton, which is hilariously funny. And you laugh at it and you laugh hard, and then you realise, holy crap, he's right, to describe her as Hillary. We've speculated for a while on the show that there's something going on with Donald Trump and his behaviour and his campaign that isn't as crazy and as kind of haphazard as it appears, that in fact it's some sort of stalking horse type thing in order to destroy any opposition to Clinton and to pave the way for her to have an easy run at the White House. Basically, the neocons and the agenda behind them, they want her in at all costs. What do you say to that?
No, I've been following Trump for years. This is a guy that was born on third base and thought he hit a home run. An arrogant boy. When I was a kid and we'd get out of line, myself and my two brothers, my parents, may their souls rest in peace, they used to threaten us. They were going to send us to military school because they couldn't control us. That was the greatest punishment you could ever have. Trump was so out of line, they actually sent him to military school. Now, could you imagine a young kid growing up, rather than, eating my mother's fine Italian cooking, going chasing the girls, playing with your friends, going out after school and on weekends, rather than doing that, dressing up in a uniform and learning how to make your bed with the right corners and tucked in? So what I'm saying is this guy's such an egomaniac. He's so out of control. His old man left him between, go to Wikipedia, you can look it up, between, it's about $250 to $400 million, in that range. His father was a real estate tycoon in New York. So this guy, when you look at his behavior and you listen to his language, rather than saying, duh, like, what he does is he repeats the same words over and over again. He's as thin as he is, and his ego is so huge. You watch what he did with Bush. As soon as the first debate, he goes up to him and puts his arm around him. And, you're a nice guy, but you really don't have it. If somebody put their arm on me like that, the guy'd be on the floor.
Yeah.
Get your arms. Don't touch me. But I'm saying he knows how to do that because of where he comes from and who he is. No, he just lost it. You go back to our Trends Journal, the spring edition, a year ago, and we called it the Presidential Reality Show. Matter of fact, we were so sure it was a reality show. This was 2 months before Trump announced that he was getting in the race, and nobody was even talking Trump. Here's what we forecast. If the election were held today and Hillary Clinton survives the cash for influence scandal, we forecast Clinton as the winner. On issues of gay rights, women's rights, and abortion, Cruz, Paul, Rubio, Carson, Fiorina, and Huckabee will find weak support among a sizable portion of women voters. And then we go on to say why. About, Richie, over 10 million more women vote than men. And when you look back at the last couple of campaigns with Obama, he got the vast majority, but over 12% more than his contenders. So Trump has a negative 73% rating with women. And when he came out last week and said that if a woman got an abortion and they were illegal, the woman should be punished for it. And when you watch him doing this, you can see him stumbling over his tongue.
So is it possible that Trump isn't aware that he's being used? Is it possible? Trump is sincere, but he might be being used as a stalking horse for Clinton.
No, the Republican Party's at zero. They have nobody. And this guy came in and ran all over them. Look at the Republican elite. I'll name them. Lindsey Graham, John McCain, McConnell, Ryan. That guy, Paul Ryan, I think he used to play the Eddie Munster in that, one of those, the Munster family.
Yeah.
Look at this. There's nobody there. It's the Wizard of Oz. There's an old man behind the curtain with a dog. And Trump That's why Trump, then you look on the other end with this Bernie Sanders with his bad Coney Island act. I'm going to give you free education. I'm going to give you free health care, as he's waving his arms and talking to us like a little stupid, like he's selling conditions in Brooklyn. I grew up in the Bronx. I know the act, Bernie. Save it. But the people believe it. He's picking up where Obama did to support Clinton because she has such high negative ratings as a person. So he's bringing in all the millennials and there's those diehard liberals that will believe the garbage. Look at his campaign slogan. A future to believe in. What was Obama's slogan?
Change we can believe in, yeah.
You got it. Yeah, small change, no change. So again, I began my career at a graduate school. I used to run political campaigns in Westchester County, the richest county in the United States, right north of New York City, Scarsdale, Bronxville, Hartsdale, where the rich people from the city go at night. I was so good at it, they sent me up to Albany. I was the assistant to the secretary of the New York State Senate. From there, I designed and instructed American politics and campaign technology and taught it at St. John's University. One of my chief contributors to my magazine, the Trends Journal, is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, Reagan's former assistant treasury secretary.
Great guy. He was on the program only a couple of nights ago. Lovely fella.
And by the way, if anybody really wants to hear some insights you never heard before, go to our website, and there's a video. He came up here to visit us just before Occupy Peace to help launch it. And there's Gary Knoll, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, and myself. It's called Celente Roberts Knoll Video. You will hear things you never heard before. And he's telling what's going on behind closed doors in the White House when he was there. This is a guy that could bring in the director of the CIA and question him under oath. And he did. A lot of what you see is what it is. Are there deals going on in the back? Yes. But if there's an Illuminati, they better get people that are a little bit illuminated rather than the un-Illuminati doing their work for them.
What's going to happen in November then? To us, we feel it's pretty straightforward. Hillary Clinton is going to win the presidency.
That's our forecast.
And that is your I know this because I get as a journal sent to me. It's terrific. Trendsresearch.com. And what you're going to have then, Gerald, just before I ask you the final question, I'm going to read the tweets because we've had an enormous amount of tweets coming in. Zana in New Zealand says, hello to you. Brilliant commentary from Gerald about what a farce Trump is, she says, sent to military school as a kid. She's finding that hilarious. Sean McDonald says, Richie, I think Trump is a test stick to see how far Clinton can violate the country when she's elected. Emmeline says, my description of Clinton, evil Dolly Parton. You watch her, how she moves and how she talks. Wayne is on to say he really, really likes Gerald's passion. His blood boils as well. Wayne's does. These are very emotive subjects. He was talking about when Gerald was talking about the mass murder of people around the world by these lunatics in the cabal. Interesting tweet from JP about the petrodollar. I'll retweet that, my friend. Thanks for that. The Twitter handle is at Richie Allen Show. It's at Richie Allen Show. Sue says, hi Sue, excellent Gerald. She says, truth, justice and peace to you, says Sue. There's been loads of tweets like that. If you want to follow what others are saying, it's Richie Allen Show, all one word, Richie Allen Show. Just before I ask you the final question, Gerald, a listener has tweeted that he thinks that the Panama leak or the Panama Papers might be a way of washing dirty black operations money, black op money, ending with a slap on the wrist for the guilty. It makes the papers for a while, but then it goes away. That's an interesting take on it. Washing dirty black op money. What do you think of that?
Yeah, again, it's been going on whether the big corporations do it or the individuals do it. And it will go away. Nothing will happen from this. It's just a quick news bite unless they come out with, names that really count. And it's going to be interesting, by the way, what happens. You mentioned about Cameron's deceased father, washing dough. Will that come back to haunt him? And it may well. But here's the deal. when all else fails, they take you to war. Look how the people's minds get off the economy when there's a terror strike in France or in Brussels. Bingo, it's gone. Same thing will happen in the United States. So the world economies, just look at the report that came out just yesterday from the IMF, the International Mafia Federation. And when they said they're worried about China's decline because of all the connections with it and how it's going to affect the global equity markets. The only reason the equity markets keep going is because of frauds being committed by the central banks. You have negative interest rates in Europe, the Eurozone. You have negative interest rates in Japan. The United States raised interest rates, the grand total of 25 basis points for the first time since 2006, 10 years ago. So all of this cheap money, for example, allows all those stock buybacks and mergers and acquisitions. That's the only thing that's keeping the front going, that the equity markets appear sound. But when you look at the reality here in the States, for example, these stock buybacks, which are leveraging the markets up, they're doing over $60 billion a month in just buybacks. In the meantime, corporate profits continue to fall. So there's no true price discovery. There's no price earnings ratios that are near where they should be. They're way inflated. So what I'm saying is, when all else fails, they take you to war. And they throw out these bits and pieces like they're doing with the Panama paper. Let's hate Putin. Let's start blaming him on what's going to happen with Ukraine as that devolves further into a depressionary state. As you're looking now, it's becoming starvation rates are among, they are the highest in the region.
Which you predicted, by the way. You predicted this in the journal. As I said, I get the journal. We said it on this program. They would do to Ukraine what they've done to Greece, to Spain, to Italy, to Portugal. They would give it a massive loan it could never pay back, and they would destroy the country. And of course, what's her face? Bob Kagan's wife has overseen that, along with Natalie Jaresko. It's the same old story played out by the same characters, isn't it?
Again, you nailed it perfectly. You know their names and faces. You mentioned Newland.
Newland, yeah.
Married to Kagan. The neocon of neocons. As a matter of fact, Newland worked for Penis Cheney, or it was a Dick Cheney. I always get them mixed up. You know, and then she was, Hillary Clinton's, worked for her. Now she's working with Kerry. So what I'm saying is the faces are there. You mentioned Jaresko. She becomes a Ukrainian citizen overnight.
A Chicago woman.
Yeah. And again, with a line of questionable financial dealings when she was with these governmental organizations. So I'm saying to you, it's there in front of us. So, but the whole thing is failing. And now, of course, the war heating up between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And when you look at who's supporting it, and even the Wall Street Journal is blaming it on Azerbaijan. And so who's supporting Azerbaijan? The Turks. And look what the Turks are doing when they were losing the elections in June of 2015. They started waging war against the Kurds. And, of course, they're well behind trying to overthrow Assad in Syria.
Yeah. And
they came out, Erdogan said he was supporting Azerbaijan. So you can see, and who supports Armenia? Russia. And Russia has 5,000 troops in Armenia. So you can see where this is leading. When all else fails, they take you to war.
We're going to leave it there for now. Gerald, it's always a pleasure having you on the programme. Folks, you got to get with trendsresearch.com if you haven't done already. This man has been making predictions about geopolitical trends for years and been making them accurately as well. Love having you on, my friend. It's been a long time. We won't leave it as long to ask you back. The reason we didn't is because you get a million of these a week. We know that. And we don't want to be jumping the queue either. Continued success to you and everybody at trendsresearch.com, Gerald. Thanks again, my friend.
And thank you, and call me anytime. I love being on with you, and thank you for all you're doing.
Legend. Gerald Celente on the line to us there from his office in the great city of New York.